The horrific acts these superpowered beings have committed will really make you think twice about their status as a hero. Namor. Namor is a complex figure. Originally a bad guy, fans thought he was so compelling with his twisted sense of justice that the writers had him flip sides to fight the Third Reich, as was the fashion at the time. And so, technically speaking, Namor became one of Marvel's very first anti-heroes, which is why he's earned the first spot on this video. He's not your typical do-gooder. See, he's fine with offing folks if it gets results. And that's not all. Despite his heroic change of heart, Namor typically swings back to his villainous ways every now and then, and when he does some serious damage. Like there was that time in Avengers vs. X-Men when he went nuts with power after being given the Phoenix Force and literally wiped out Wakanda. Then there was that time he ordered a giant humanoid whale Giganto to smash New York City to pieces, and one time he even pushed the button to detonate an entire alternate Earth, populated and all. Dude really does not give a darn about civilian casualties, so to say that this underwater powerhouse isn't one to play nice is definitely a vast understatement. He's not as calculatedly brutal as some other Marvel heroes, but his hot-headedness and aggression sure make him a wild card in the Marvel world. A fish out of water in the hero game, swimming in a sea of moral ambiguity, all puns intended. Next up is Red Hood. Jason Todd, once Batman's Robin, took a dark turn after a brutal encounter with the Joker. His turn towards the dark side came as a result of fans getting to vote on whether he lived or perished in a comic storyline back in '88, and you can guess which one they chose, with the Boy Wonder meeting his end when the Joker snuffed him out with a crowbar. Fast forward years later, and Jason came back from the dead with a grudge. Reborn as the Red Hood, he ditched the whole hero thing and went on a revenge spree. He wasn't playing nice anymore. Gone were the days of just catching crooks. No. Now he was all about taking out his enemies with no mercy. And boy oh boy, his list of enemies was long. He antagonized his Robin successors. He blamed Batman for not offing the Joker, thinking Bat let the Joker slide. In fact, when he first came back, he absolutely brutalized the Joker in Under the Hood, even pulling the same crowbar trick that the Joker had used on him. And then he went on to force Batman into an ultimatum, deciding whose life should be spared, his own or the Joker's. Later in the story Battle for the Cowl, he took on the Batman mantle in Bruce Wayne's absence and committed some horrifying crimes in Batman's name and image. Even though he's gone from teaming up with villains to being more of an anti-hero, the Red Hood's quest for payback against crime, even if it meant ending people, went way beyond what Batman would ever approve of. If you're enjoying the video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. Next up, let's talk about the Punisher. Frank Castle started off as a kind of hero who did bad stuff for what he thought were good reasons, but as time went on, things got way darker. He stopped caring about the reasons and just went full throttle into violence. He used to have this code, this idea that he was taking out the bad guys for a purpose, but now it's like he doesn't even need a reason. If he deems somebody as evil, they're as good as toast in his book. I mean, this guy's done some seriously messed up stuff. We're talking about ripping out people's guts with his bare freaking hands. And get this, he's taken out more people than you would even want to imagine. Literally upwards of like 50,000. It's hard to see how he could get any more brutal than he already is. Next up is the Comedian from the Watchmen series. Edward Blake, known as the Comedian, was a vigilante who towed the line between heroism and downright cruelty. He saw the world as a messed up place and believed that people were just as naturally messed up too. While he did fight on the side of good, it's really hard to call Blake a hero. I mean, come on, he didn't sign up for the gig to protect the good guys. He did it because he enjoys hurting the bad ones. Sadistic to be sure. As proof of this, he joined up with a sketchy government program and did some awful things in the Vietnam War. And the Comedian didn't regret any of it. In fact, he was almost proud of how far he went. He even attempted to assault his own teammate Silk Spectre. Now, the Comedian is an anti-hero by definition. He fought on the side of the good, sure, but his dark side was a lot darker than most. He was a mix of violence, nihilism, and twisted morals all wrapped into one messed up package. Next Next up, let's talk Blade. So a good rule of thumb for comic book characters is that if you wield a sword, you're probably gonna teeter more towards extreme violence, given that swords come with obligatory dismemberment. But when you're literally named after said weapon, you're basically committed to sticking yourself in the brutality box. Now the thing is, Blade stands out in the Marvel world because he's one of those characters that writers use to unleash their most horrifyingly violent ideas. Why? Well, I mean, vampires aren't exactly garnering a lot of sympathy from the audience, so there aren't many tears shed when they bite the dust. And Blade, he gets that. He knows there's not much space for being nice and decent when you're literally fighting against vampires. So he brings an intensity that's seriously off the charts. Like, consider how if Blade decided to go after regular humans with that same lethal penchant, he'd probably be recognized as Marvel's most brutal supervillain. But hey, he's sticking to the bloodsuckers. Still, makes you wonder how far an anti-hero can go before they cross the line.
Number 5. Punisher. Probably one of the most iconic when it comes to the idea of what an anti-hero is. Frank Castle was also one of the first. It's likely because of him as well that the idea of seeking revenge became a somewhat dark one. The Punisher's main quest is to get vengeance, not just for himself, but for others whom he thinks deserve it. Originally, he turned to a life of vigilantism after the death of his family, who happened to be on a picnic at the wrong place, the wrong time, and were witnesses to something they shouldn't have been. As such, they were eliminated by the mob. Despite also being shot, Frank survived the attack, though the rest of his family died, and as a result, he swore revenge. He's also known for being an overly violent hero who fights with guns, which is something most heroes look down upon, preferring to use non-lethal force. The Punisher would achieve next-level anti-hero status when he also became the first anti-hero to kill the entire Marvel Universe in 1995, in Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe, paving the way for another popular anti-hero, Deadpool, to also do so years later. Of course, it would take Deadpool until the 2000s before that would even be a thing for him. The 2010s, as it were, actually. Number 4. Wolverine. Logan, being considered a little more rough around the edges and animalistic, is what quickly granted him an anti-hero status. As far as superheroes go, he was different. He made his first full appearance in The Incredible Hulk Volume 1, Issue 181. Since the beginning, his violent nature and broodiness has made him both well-loved by fans, but sometimes disliked by other heroes. He also has less hang-ups when it comes to killing people, even suggesting at times that it's the best course of action when dealing with villains, and having a pretty big thing for mercy killing when it comes to other heroes. This has also made Logan one of the biggest anti-heroes in the X-Men world. He just kills tons of people. People will be like, I think I'm gonna die, and he's like, I got you, don't worry. I'll make it quick. Number 3. Magneto. Magneto has been known as the foil to X-Men's Professor Xavier for years. Xavier was also the leader of the X-Men, while Magneto was the leader of the first Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, who were often the X-Men's enemies. Still, Magneto does what he does often to make the life of mutants better, albeit through punishing humanity, which, you know, not so great. And while he has spent a lot of time being a villain, over the years he has definitely shifted more to anti-hero, especially in the new Dawn of X mutant relaunch, where he often works alongside Charles. Although Charles is always like, calm down, man. And he's like, no! I will slightly overreact, because I'm Magneto, and that's what I do. Number 2. Catwoman. Catwoman has always operated more on the edge of what's right and wrong since her introduction, which is part of the huge appeal when it comes to her, and has been part of a huge problem in regards to her on and off again relationship with Batman. Though Batman wasn't really a saint either when it came to his early days, but anyways. When Catwoman first appeared in Batman Volume 1, Issue Number 1, it was as a jewel thief, and Batman at the time was engaged to a woman named Julie. Still, he was tempted to join her and become her king of crime, but when he refused her, she managed to escape his clutches, sneaking away. Batman really hoped that he'd run into her again, despite her criminal tendencies, and despite the fact that he was engaged, and his wish would eventually be granted. Catwoman would even team up with Batman and join him in his acts of heroism, though originally it would often be for her own motives alone, but she became more of a hero as time went on. Number 1. Namor. Namor is an interesting one. When he first debuted in Motion Picture Funnies Weekly, it was as a young prince attacking land dwellers, seeking revenge for his people. He would then go on to join the fight in World War II, fighting against Nazis with heroes such as Captain America. Later, he would forget who he was and only regain his memories when he was accidentally knocked into the ocean in the original Fantastic Four series by Johnny Storm. He would then rediscover who he was, and that the kingdom that had been his underwater home home had been destroyed by the Humans' War's nuclear bomb tests, and as a result would attack the land, becoming a villain. Again. Since then, he has done a variety of good and not always so good things, but what remains constant is that Namor's methods have pretty much always been questionable. His return to being good, but in his own way, and still while thinking very highly of himself, made him an anti-hero. And while he is very passionate about protecting his people, there is no doubt that this means he would also do anything to safeguard Atlantis, regardless of how morally ambiguous or severe it might be.
Coming in at number 10, we have Namor the Submariner. Now, if you just look at his record on paper, Namor has a pretty villainous track record. A half mutant and half Atlantean warrior, he's constantly fighting the Fantastic Four, frequently fighting the Avengers, and has occasionally kidnapped the Invisible Woman at least once or twice. However, as leader of the Atlantean people, many of these conflicts only came about as Namor sought to do what was best for his followers and countrymen, and has in recent years become an ally to the Avengers, the Defenders, the Illuminati, and many other superhero groups. Just as long as you don't do anything to harm Atlantis, Namor can be an incredibly useful and powerful friend to have in your corner. At number 9, we have the beloved vampire killer known as Blade. Born as a human-vampire hybrid named Eric Brooks, Blade has all of the powers of a Marvel Universe vampire with nearly none of the negative side effects. He possesses superhuman strength and speed, with all of his senses heightened to make him a perfect predator while being immune to damage from sunlight, silver, or holy artifacts that would instantly turn a regular vampire powerless. While he does still need the nutrients from fresh human blood to prevent himself from losing control of his hunger, Blade often uses a special serum as opposed to actually draining any humans. With so many strengths and so little weaknesses, Blade is definitely a blood-sucking force to be reckoned with. Coming in at number 8, we have Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. Now, the Punisher obviously fits the bill as an anti-hero, but is he really one of the most powerful? Well, despite his lack of actual superhuman abilities, the Punisher is considered to be at the absolute peak of non-enhanced human performance, with a long military history and years of physical combat training. However, the truly most terrifying thing about the Punisher is his dedication to his cause. While other heroes may shy away from violence and especially murder, the Punisher has no such qualms. And the fear that the Marvel Universe's villains feel towards a hero that's willing to get as dirty as they are, that's some pretty intense stuff and definitely deserving of a spot on this list. At number 7, we have Johnny Blaze, aka the Fiery Ghost Rider. After Johnny made a deal with the villain Mephisto, a demon that just loves to try and steal the souls and happiness of various superheroes for some reason, he became the Ghost Rider, capable of combining his form with that of a spirit of vengeance known as Zarathos. Completely immune to any sort of physical attack unless it was made by a weapon of angelic origin, Johnny is able to manipulate and control Hellfire, one of the most dangerous substances in the entire Marvel Universe that burns not only physical objects, but the soul or essence of them as well. While he's veered towards the dark side with his hellish abilities several times over the years, Johnny overall strives towards redemption and using his demonic powers for something at least slightly close to good. Coming in at number 6, we're gonna have to go with the famous, or should I say, infamous, Deadpool. Originally a villain for the X-Force, Deadpool has over the years turned into a charming and fourth wall breaking anti-hero that's always trying to do some form of good, but sometimes shows it in some pretty odd and violent ways. However, the most notable aspect of Deadpool's powers and what makes him so powerful is his sheer inability to die. No matter how many times you stab him, shoot him, or chop some bits off, Deadpool will always bounce back with at least a couple of bad jokes. Add in his not insignificant skill with all manner of firearms and weaponry, and you've got an explosive anti-hero that you wouldn't want to mess with. Coming in at number 5, we have Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, aka the Red Hulk. For years, General Ross had been the lead military commander in charge of tracking down and capturing the Incredible Hulk, and had been a persistent thorn in Bruce Banner's side. But following the death of his daughter and the Hulk's exile into outer space, Ross was manipulated by MODOK and several other supervillains into
becoming the Red Hulk, in case his nemesis should ever return. And while for a time the Red Hulk was a feared adversary for the heroes who remained on Earth, Ross would eventually see to reason and become a functioning member of the Avengers, being just as strong as the original Hulk, but with the ability to consciously change between forms. And he even recently gained the ability to maintain his iconic mustache while transforming, showing that even Gamma monsters can rock some stylish facial hair. Coming in at number 4, we have Emma Frost, aka the White Queen. Another member of the X-Men villains that have gone good gang, Emma Frost is one of the most powerful telepaths in the entire Marvel universe, even rivaling the abilities of Professor Charles Xavier. With the addition of a secondary mutation that allows her to harden her body into an organic diamond state, Emma would already be one of the most dangerous beings on the planet. But combined with her leadership skills among the Hellfire Club and her ability to manipulate the different groups making up mutant society, and let's just say it's a good thing that she's allied with the rest of mutant kind on their home island of Krakoa. For now, at least. At number 3, we've gotta go with Joe Fixit, the Grey Hulk alter ego of Bruce Banner. The original Gamma monster that first appeared after Bruce's destined exposure to radiation, the Grey Hulk would eventually manifest as all of the dirty deeds that Bruce Banner was too unsure of himself to accomplish. Dubbing himself Mr. Fixit, the Grey Hulk refused to return to human form for months, and became a grizzled enforcer and tough guy for different casinos in Las Vegas. Coming to terms with this gritty and mischievous aspect of his own personality, Joe Fixit has since become a mental companion to Bruce Banner, and along with the Savage Hulk, is one of the personas that Bruce can now best rely on. Just don't let him catch you cheating at cards. Coming in at number 2, we have everyone's favorite hero that's owed money by Dracula, it's Moon Knight. Even before being gifted powers as the Fist and High Priest of an Egyptian moon god, Mark Spector was a dangerous and highly skilled man, a highly trained mercenary with a small fortune made from gambling over the years, and who fought during multiple tours of Iraq. After finally falling in battle, Mark was resurrected by the Egyptian god Khonshu, who offered to save his life in return for his service. Thus, the vigilante Moon Knight was born, an extremely capable and violent crime fighter, protecting those traveling at night, but also dealing with some mental issues and unstable personalities of his own. All of this combines to make one hell of an interesting anti-hero, and I for one can't wait to see Oscar Isaac play him on Disney+. And finally, in our number 1 spot for today's list, we have James Logan Howlett, aka the Wolverine. One of the most well-known X-Men of all time, Wolverine is the perfect combination of mutant powers and vicious killing ability. With a healing ability that borders on making Logan completely unkillable, and the indestructible metal adamantium having been grafted onto both his skeleton and claws during the Weapon X experiments, Wolverine is one of the most terrifying opponents to face in the entire Marvel universe. And while in recent times he's become a well-respected leader on the island of Krakoa, Wolverine has a long history of amnesia and violent missions, and will often volunteer to take on the jobs that other heroes might squirm away from. And that is exactly what makes Wolverine our top anti-hero of today's list.
Judge Dredd. Judge Joseph Dredd is a law enforcement officer in Mega City 1, a city in North America in a dystopian future. While some heroes on this list are considered anti-heroes because their morality is kind of in a gray area, Judge Dredd is here because his morality is absolute and brutal. Dredd's often viewed as the personification of blind justice, and his actions show this when he convicts, sentences, and executes criminals. Number 9. The Comedian. Edward Morgan Blake is a vigilante hero and member of the Watchmen, who is characterized by his affable personality and charm. Although the Comedian fights for the side of good, he's also a straight up jerk. I would love him as a hero since I love wisecracking superheroes, but there's one thing he did that I just can't get past, which is his attempted rape of Sally Jupiter, the Silk Spectre. For me, I'm fine with anti-heroes killing bad guys and looking out for themselves. You know, you can be selfish all you want, but if you do something as evil as the Comedian tried to do, I just can't like you anymore. But maybe the fact that I respect him as a hero, but hate him as a person means that he was actually perfect in the anti-hero role, which is why he's on this list. Number 8. Moon Knight. Mark Spector took on the mantle of Moon Knight after being revived by the moon god Khonshu. This one's kinda tricky because recently Moon Knight has taken a bit of a break from the whole killing thing, but he has enough dead bodies in his past for me to still consider him an anti-hero. Plus, the line, "I wear white so they can see me coming," is just super awesome. Almost as good as Deadpool's, "He has the right idea, he wore the brown pants." While Moon Knight, or White Batman as some people call him, is pretty tame for an anti-hero, he's done some pretty messed up stuff, like I don't know, cutting off his enemy's face. But other than the face cutting, he's a pretty good guy. Number 7, Lobo. Lobo is somewhat less known than others on this list, but he is basically the epitome of the anti-hero. Although he was originally revealed as a villain, this alien biker mercenary was later brought back to life as a grim and gritty anti-hero, comparable to the Punisher, but grungier, because the 90s. Fans quickly latched on to Lobo, and he's been a part of many teams and series since he was revived. Gifted with super speed, strength, stamina, and intelligence, as well as incredible healing and immortality, Lobo is pretty strong and super intimidating. Number 6, Venom. When an alien symbiote attached itself to Eddie Brock, Venom was born. While traditionally viewed as a villain, Venom has become something of an anti-hero in more recent years, often teaming up with Spider-Man to defeat more powerful villains like Carnage. Venom doesn't always choose the evil route. He still does have a rather strong urge to protect the innocent, and he does this both alongside Spider-Man and Solo. That said, when he does catch the bad guy, that guy is in for a world of hurt. Probably death. Painful death. Although apparently they're coming out with a solo film for Venom, which will be pretty cool. I hope they do it well.
Next, let's talk about Black Adam. Black Adam seriously did not start out that heroic. In fact, he's done some things that even the nastiest bad guys would find disturbing. Black Adam is a story of good intentions gone haywire. He was given powers to help out, but ended up being all about himself. First, he offed his own nephew in order to get the other half of the power bestowed onto them by the wizard Shazam. Definitely not exactly a heroic origin story. Later on, he became a ruler thinking that he knew what justice was all about, but instead of playing by the rules, he did some seriously messed up things like orchestrating unalivings and going on what was essentially a meaningless rampage that ended loads of innocent people's lives in a country called Balia, just because he was upset about not being able to find the bad guys right away. Definitely would not describe that as heroic. Now, even though there are technically worse villains out there, his actions were so bad that basically every hero ever teamed up to take him down at one point or another. And yet, he is still considered a hero himself. Wolverine. Wolverine, right from the get-go, was one tough and kinda scary dude. His story is far from sunshine and rainbows. Like, he's been through some seriously tough stuff. Like, his backstory is just riddled with tragedy. He accidentally offed his parents. He's been living since like the 16th century and has watched everyone he knows and loves age and perish, except for his brutal nemesis that won't leave him or his loved ones alone. He got experimented on against his will to have adamantium fused to his skeleton. I mean, the guy's been through the ringer, so I guess that somewhat justifies all the horrible things he's done, but come on. Did you really have to visit Matsuo every year just to chop off one of his body parts? Even he thought being killed would have been more merciful. I mean, sure, the X-Men did try to help him be more human, but when you literally start off your career as a living weapon, it's kind of tough to shake that off. Sometimes they even used his animalistic tendencies to their advantage, as Wolverine is definitely not the type to back down. No. When someone threatens peace or hurts innocence, he's out there, claws out, ready to bring the pain. And let me tell you, when Wolverine does go all out, it's nothing short of jaw-droppingly intense. He might have gone a bit too far sometimes, but for him, it's all about protecting those who can't protect themselves, and dealing out a whole lot of pain to those he believes deserves it. Harley Quinn. When we're talking about someone whose origin stories had her literally fall in love with the most diabolical maniac in all of Gotham, nay, in all of DC, saying that her morality is ambiguous is a vast understatement. She used to be a villain who would not hold back on brutality, even when it came to youngsters like the Robins. But then things flipped. Post 52, she took a turn aiming to do some good with a little bit of heroic retribution. In the new 52, she wore the anti-heroine cape, trying to balance out the scales by fighting on the side of justice. One of her big moments was when she faced off against the Joker, and even more notably when she helped the Suicide Squad. I mean, clearly she's on this path to redemption. And who knows, perhaps she's inching closer and closer to becoming a full-blown hero. Probably not. Next on the list is Deadpool. Wade Wilson's got this thing for violence, which is like his go-to solution for just about everything. Now, he can and has shown the potential to be a great villain, like that time he eliminated everybody in the Marvel universe. But deep down, he's not all bad. Despite his love for chaos and mayhem, he sort of means well. He takes on the bad guys specifically, but he does it in a way that's a little extreme. Like, Sorry, seriously extreme. Making puppets out of enemies' leftovers? Yeah, that's way over the line. Eating the remains of his enemies? Absolutely bonkers. But in his mind, it's all part of fighting the good fight. He's a chaotic good guy, twisted, crazy, but somehow still on the side of good. Seems like nothing is below Deadpool. He was even willing, ready, and capable to become the Herald of Galactus. He literally shot a dude in the noggin just because he said he enjoyed the Star Wars prequels. Going too far? Try never far enough. And last on our list we have Batman. Yeah, plot twist. Bet you didn't expect good old Bats on this list, did ya? That's right, y'all. Though he's touted as a hero, what with his rule about not ending lives and not using any lethal weapons like firearms, he's definitely crossed the lethal line on more than one occasion. Let's rewind to the early days, shall we? Back then, like in Batman #1 for example, Hugo Strange pulls off this stunt where he turns some mentally ill folks into giants. Now dealing with these giants wasn't exactly a cakewalk for Batman, leaving him to resort to some extreme measures to deal with people who were formerly just innocent mental patients. For one of these poor suckers, he actually hung him from the bat plane. Yeah, that happened. There was this other time where he was just unwilling to deal with the KG Beast anymore, so he literally left him to rot trapped in a sewer. If he proves anything, it's that you don't really need flashy weapons to be an anti-hero. Really, all you gotta do is break a few rules.
Number 10. Helena Wayne as Huntress. Before Helena Bertinelli was Huntress, we had Helena Wayne. Helena Wayne was the daughter of Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle, Batman and Catwoman respectively. Although she didn't come from a crime family, she was still heavily trained by her parents, and eventually took up the mantle Huntress as a vigilante. Like the main continuity Huntress, she was also known for being more violent than was considered acceptable. After her mother's death, she moved out and blaming the criminal Silky Cernak for her mother's death, as he had blackmailed Selina into returning to a life of crime as Catwoman, Helena Wayne set out for revenge. Catwoman died when she returned to her life of crime. No. Mom, why? Number 9. Venom. Venom would technically make its first appearance in issue 252 of volume 1 of the Amazing Spider-Man series, but it wouldn't be until almost 50 issues later in issue 299 that the suit would develop a mind of its own, or well, bind its own mind with that of Eddie Brock's mind, and be introduced to us again as Venom. Once Eddie had got his hands on the suit, he began to plot sweet revenge on Peter Parker. But during his first appearance, Peter, who was also rocking a black and white suit at the time, albeit not the symbiotic one, I know, confusing, was not at home, so instead Venom ran into MJ in her and Peter's apartment, scaring her senseless. Eddie would go on to terrorize Peter, but the two would at times reluctantly team up to take on even bigger bads, as despite being kind of a bad guy, Eddie had sort of a moral code. He definitely didn't like to kill innocent civilians and tried to avoid that when possible, though also he sometimes did that. The two teamed up to take on villains like Carnage, and eventually Eddie would become a hero in his own right. He's probably got one of the best story arcs in comics because of his gradual transformation since his introduction as Venom in '88, from complete villain to, well, complete anti-hero. Maybe even like full-on hero now. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is Venom a full hero yet? Can we go there? Number 8. John Constantine. Constantine made his first appearance in Swamp Thing Volume 2, Issue 37. He is known as an occult detective from England who likes to do things his own way. He's somewhat violent and reckless, with somewhat of a disregard for the smaller things. To John, sometimes you have to break a few eggs or sacrifice a few souls to make an omelet. And as long as it's for the greater good, he's sometimes fine with that. In his own series Hellblazer, which started in 1988 and ran for over 300 issues, the original tone of the series was quite dark, because the series also came out as part of DC's Vertigo line, which was known for being one of the darkest imprints that DC ever had. Of course, sadly, Vertigo is no more, but in its place we now have the stunning DC Black Label, so I guess it's fine. Just kidding. DC Black Label's really awesome. But still, can't we have both? Can't we have both DC? Number 7. V. V comes to us from Alan Moore and David Lloyd's series V for Vendetta. He's a mysterious character who is also known as Patient Number 5, who's said to be one of the many victims of abuse in a resettlement camp run by the fascist and villainous Norsefire-ruled government. It is believed that V was a test subject at the camp who escaped. He then adopted the mantle V and began to work on building an anarchistic uprising to topple the oppressive regime. His methods were meant to appear morally ambiguous so that readers could decide how to see him, as a hero or as a madman. Man. V made his first appearance in the series Warrior in issue number 1. Also, if you haven't checked out that little story that he's in Warrior, V for Vendetta, it's really great. Just saying. Also, the series is great. Number 6. Black Cat. Black Cat was first introduced in The Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1 issue 194 as a thief, and she continued to be that for quite a while. But she was also introduced as a love interest for Spider-Man at the same time, which she would also continue to be for some time. Distracting Spidey with a kiss, she was able to get away with the goods she needed and succeeded in breaking her dad out of jail as a result. Though we wouldn't learn her dad's connection to her until the next issue. Being a mysterious figure with self-serving motives has always left her painted as an anti-hero, even when she has heroic intentions at heart. Although Felicia Hardy has played both sides before as well, being a full-on hero and a full-on criminal at times.
Halfway through at number 5, Gorilla Grodd. Gorilla Grodd is a villain, I know, but in reference to the Arrowverse, this character might be turning over a new leaf. So, spoilers if you aren't caught up on The Flash until episode 15 of season 6. In this episode titled Grodd Friended Me, a play on the name of another television series, God Friended Me, Grodd is able to tap into Barry's mind and bring him into his. While Grodd has Barry trapped in his mind, he asks for help escaping. Since they put him in a permanent coma, cutting off his higher brain function at Argus in order to protect everyone, because you know, it's Gorilla Grodd, with the use of King Shark's crown which they had modified. Grodd says that he has had time to think, and that while he has done some terrible things, he regrets them and wishes to return to Gorilla City, which is now on Earth Prime thanks to Crisis. Grodd's mind was also not affected by Crisis, meaning he has all memories of what he had done on Earth 1, and he also mentions this, saying he knows about the Crisis. Barry ends up eventually helping him, even merging their minds and giving Grodd his powers temporarily while in his mind, defeating the Gatekeeper and escaping his mind prison. So now that Grodd seems to be on the up and up, we may see him as an ally to Team Flash in the future. Also, Flash Grodd was badass. In at 4, Harvey Specter. Harvey Specter is a character from the television show Suits, which began airing back in 2011. While he may not be a comic character, Harvey is for sure what we can classify as an anti-hero. His questionable methods started in episode 1, where he hired a guy who came into his office running from the cops with a briefcase full of an illegal substance. Weed. This kid that he hired also didn't have a law degree or a license, meaning that it was illegal for him to practice law. While this may be a constant drama point for the series, Harvey has done some pretty shady things to get what was right done in the past, such as forging documents with the help of this fraud, blackmail, obstruction of justice in order for his secretary to get away with a crime. He's beaten people and threatened them, all within the 5 seasons I'm currently on. While Harvey is always fighting the good fight, he does compromise his morals constantly for either the good of the firm, himself, Mike Ross, the fraud he hired, or his client, even if he can tell the client is guilty because it's his job. He is literally the definition of an anti-hero. And at 3, Young Cable. Kid Cable was set up back in Cable 157, which revealed that Cable is a complex time-space event on his own. The timeline has changed around Cable countless times, and because of this, history is full of different versions of Ascani. This became a major part of the Extermination event, which introduced Young Cable, whose job it was to correct the timeline and send all the new X-Men back to their own times. The very first thing he did, however, was kill the old Cable, since the young version believed he should have sent them back a long time ago. Ever since this time, Young Cable has become very important, since he not only returned all the X-Men to their own time, but he used a part of the Phoenix Force to resurrect Scott Summers, since he died due to the exposure to the Inhumans' Terrigen Mist. Not only is this new since the Extermination event ended in December of 2018, but it also is a new version of Cable, not only to the readers and other characters, but to this world. It's a newer version of Cable than the one we've been seeing, because he was basically born yesterday in comparison. And at 2, Rick Sanchez. Rick Sanchez is the main protagonist and one of the title characters of the animated comedy Rick and Morty, which airs on Adult Swim. He is a super genius scientist who is a reckless, nihilistic alcoholic who's constantly bringing his grandson Morty on adventures to other planets, dimensions, and even worse. Not much is known about his life before returning to his daughter after abandoning her for 20 years. But what is known is that Rick considers nothing important. He thinks that since what's happening here is happening on an infinite amount of planets, nothing means anything. So he is constantly willing to steal, vandalize, kidnap, torture, and especially kill his enemies, his friends, or even himself. As we see in the episode Who's Purging Now, we even see him drag his 15-year-old grandson along in his terrible ideals by bringing him to a world where they have a purge, and constantly pushing Morty to kill people, and once Morty starts, he can't stop, forcing Rick to need to stop him since now he regrets his actions. And don't even get me started on the whole soul bonding thing with Morty's dragon, that was just the worst. Oh, and Morty's mind busters, and there's a lot of evidence. There has only been 2 times where we've seen Rick deal with something he couldn't handle, be it the adventure where he had no control over the situation, or whatever it was the cat did. Oh god. Finally, in at number 1, Agent Anti-Venom. Flash Thompson became the new Venom when he was enlisted into Project Rebirth 2.0, where he bonded with the Venom symbiote. When all of Manhattan caught a virus that gave them all spider powers, the military in charge of Project Rebirth sent in Agent Venom to stop the Spider King from breaching quarantine. After the symbiote had been separated from him, he was doing everything he could to get it back, but after finding it, it tried to attach itself to two separate hosts. Spider-Man, in an attempt to kill the symbiote, poured the anti-venom serum onto it, but instead it separated and created a new anti-venom symbiote which bonded with Flash. This all happened in February of 2018. Agent Anti-Venom is one of the coolest symbiotes to ever exist on Earth 616. I think Anti-Venom is awesome, but Agent Anti-Venom is just that much cooler. There you have it, friends, the top 10 newest anti-heroes. Are there any characters you wanted to see on this list or anything that you didn't know before? Because I did not know that Oscar the Grouch was considered an anti-hero, and I'm still wrapping my mind around it.
First things first, coming in at number 10, we've got an infamous Guardian of the Galaxy with Star-Lord, aka Peter Quill. While his intergalactic team may be most well known for saving the entire Marvel cosmos on multiple occasions, the Guardians also do their fair share of less than legal missions in order to make ends meet, with Star-Lord having spent many years as an outlaw on the run following his departure from Earth. While Peter Quill was already a formidable anti-hero with just his iconic element guns, recent Guardians of the Galaxy storylines have been exploring Peter's secret solar-themed powers, implying he just might be a literal Star-Lord. At number 9, we have Bucky Barnes, aka the Winter Soldier. Originally believed to have perished during Captain America's World War II era adventures, Bucky was in fact captured and brainwashed by the villainous Hydra, turning him into the perfect weapon and such a deadly assassin that he would become infamous throughout the Marvel Universe until finally breaking free from Hydra's control with the help of his eternal friend, Steve Rogers. While he's since started using his lethal training for the side of good, the Winter Soldier is still a brutal opponent, and with an arm made out of pure vibranium, surviving one of his punches is something that his villains should definitely be worrying about. Coming in at number 8, we have Morbius the Living Vampire. Originally just a scientist named Michael Morbius, this blood-sucking anti-hero gained all of the abilities of a vampire, but with none of the weaknesses, very similar to another vampiric anti-hero, Blade. For a time, Morbius didn't have control of his urges for blood, and had to be stopped in New York City by Spider-Man himself. These days, however, Morbius has attempted to turn over a new leaf and vowed to only drink the blood of the most corrupt and the most guilty. AKA, he's kinda like the Punisher, but with a bit more of a habit of munching on his enemies, making Morbius an anti-hero to watch out for. At number 7, we have Elektra, another of the most deadly assassins in the world, coming from the ancient criminal organization known as the Hand. And while she would eventually break away from her criminal origins, Elektra still found herself battling with her inner darkness and often clashed with Daredevil over whether or not to use lethal force against those who had wronged her and her family. After being resurrected by the Hand following her death at the hand of Bullseye, Elektra became even more powerful with several new telepathic abilities that made her even more deadly than ever before, and would eventually culminate in Elektra being the current owner of the title of Daredevil in the Marvel Universe. Sorry, Matt Murdock, maybe you'll make it on part 3 of this list. Coming in at number 6, we have the mutant shapeshifter known as Mystique. Originally a villain of the X-Men who reformed the Brotherhood of Mutants in an attempt to assassinate an anti-mutant US senator, Mystique also was the one who convinced Rogue to briefly join the Brotherhood and put the concerns of mutants above all other beings. While Mystique's violent actions have calmed down in recent years, she still holds a large amount of power in mutant society, having been a brief member of the X-Men and now part of the leadership of the mutant island of Krakoa. But with her known craftiness and her abilities to impersonate the appearance of anyone, maybe trusting Mystique isn't the brightest idea just quite yet.
Coming in at number 5, we've got Loki. And while he may not be the Crown Prince of Asgard, he's definitely the Crown Prince of changing allegiances. While Loki's motivations and goals have changed frequently over his vast history, with the only consistent characterization being that of a wild card, his strength and the level of his powers has maintained a particularly high quality. Combining the strengths of both his frost giant genetics and his Asgardian upbringing, Loki would be formidable even without his mastery of magic and deception, showing that power isn't just about lifting heavy things or swinging a magical hammer, but can be just as effective scheming behind the scenes. Plus, you know, Being as handsome as Tom Hiddleston probably doesn't hurt. Coming in at number 4 is the underrated hero, the Sentry, an expert on being torn between good and evil. While I've spoken before on this channel about the Sentry being one of the most physically powerful beings in the entire Marvel multiverse, the most interesting aspect of his powers is his manifestation of the Void, an equally powerful dark version of his Power of a Million Suns based abilities. With the Void and the Sentry actually being two halves of the same person, and their internal struggle being so devastating as to put the entire world at risk, the Sentry has actually had the world's memory of him wiped on several occasions, just to prevent the Void's powers from being abused. At number 3, we have the Scarlet Witch, also known as Wanda Maximoff. Originally believing herself to be the mutant daughter of Magneto, Wanda is in reality one of the most powerful magic wielders in the Marvel multiverse, and a conduit for chaos magic that allows her to rewrite reality to her will. While Wanda may have been one of the most notable Avengers for a time, she's also struggled with her powers during events that wiped mutants off the face of the earth and brought her own children into existence through willpower alone. No matter what reality-changing adventures she's caught up in, Wanda Maximoff will always be one of the most powerful beings in the entire Marvel Universe. Coming in at number 2, we've got the character that personally first pops up when I think of the word antihero, with the iconic Venom. From Spider-Man's edgier looking costume to a bulky web-slinging supervillain to the lethal protector of San Francisco, Venom has held more jobs over the years than I have, which is honestly saying a lot. But with the recent defeat of the dark symbiote god known as Null, Venom has become the leader of the symbiotes, and thus has one of the most unstoppable armies in the entire Marvel multiverse at his beck and call. Let's hope that Venom keeps on leaning on the hero part of antihero, because otherwise, this guy would be a serious problem for the rest of the universe. And finally, coming in at the number 1 spot, we have the leader of the Brotherhood of Mutants and the master of magnetism, Magneto. While some may know him as the most notable villain the X-Men have ever faced, labeling Magneto as solely a villain is simplifying his tragic story far too much. Having rejoined with Professor X in recent years and been a major contributor to the new mutant home island of Krakoa, Magneto's dedication to the mutant race is only dwarfed by the powers he possesses. Capable of altering the very magnetic fields that hold the universe together, Magneto's abilities go far beyond the he can control metal simplification that his name seems to suggest. Magneto was recently able to help terraform the entire planet of Mars, and the version of him from the Marvel Ultimate Universe was even able to nearly single-handedly wipe out humanity himself just by reversing the planet's polarity. AKA, he's definitely more powerful than something you'd usually associate with sticking to your refrigerator.
In a 10 superior Spider-Man. During the climax of The Amazing Spider-Man number 700, Dr. Otto Octavius, otherwise known as Dr. Octopus, had been able to transfer his mind from his dying body into Peter's living one. Luckily, Peter was able to implant his memories back into Otto's mind, showing Otto that his original plan of ruining Spider-Man was not the right course of action. Instead, Otto decides that he will beat Spider-Man by being the best Spider-Man, a superior Spider-Man. As Peter, Otto breaks things off with Mary Jane, quits the Avengers, and creates Spider-Bots to patrol the town to find criminals so that he can either beat them to a pulp or maybe even kill them. But they used facial recognition software, meaning that the Green Goblin was able to avoid the gaze of the bots and create a massive goblin army under Otto's watch. After the girl he had fallen for as Peter gets kidnapped by the Goblin, Otto realizes that Peter is the only one able to stop him, so he gives his life for Peter to regain control. That's pretty honorable, in all honesty, despite all the things he did. In at 9, Oscar the Grouch. Okay, before you yell at me, he's only here because while searching for people to put on this list, I visited the list of antiheroes wiki page, and they had Oscar the Grouch listed. Now, he isn't a new character, but it's sure as hell new to me to consider him an anti-hero. How is he even an anti-hero? Because he's teaching you about the alphabet, but doing it by stealing it from the Alpha Bank? Like what? I have no idea what to think about this. If you don't know Oscar, that's him behind me. He's a green monster from the show Sesame Street, and he lives lives in a garbage can because he loves trash. Looking at my girlfriend's dating history, so did she. Buttacha. He's just a guy who hates everything but loves trash, and I think we can all relate. Not the trash thing, but hating everything and never wanting to leave your house that is still an absolute mess. Totally relatable. But seriously, how is Oscar considered an anti-hero? I don't get it. And at 8, Anti-Venom. Anti-Venom's first appearance was in New Ways to Die, a story from the Amazing Spider-Man number 569. Nice. Where Eddie Brock gets a job at the soup kitchen, with his boss being Martin Lee. Lee secretly cures Brock of his cancer using his life force abilities, and Eddie just thinks it's a miracle. At some point after this, Eddie gets attacked by the Venom at the time, because the symbiote wanted to reunite with Brock. But due to the way his cancer was cured, his skin becomes corrosive to the symbiote, essentially becoming poison to the touch. This causes Brock to be taken by a new white symbiote, when the remainder of Venom merges with his white blood cells. The second host we see is attending a self-help seminar for villains. We are unsure as to whether this anti-Venom was a symbiote or just a dude in a costume, but the speech bubble used suggests that he is indeed a symbiote. During the Venom Inc. arc, the anti-Venom symbiote was used to create a cure for Venom's toxic shock syndrome, which then caused Venom to bind with Flash Thompson, who thanks to the serum recreated anti-Venom. And at 7, the Winchester brothers. Sam and Dean Winchester from Supernatural are the very definition of anti-heroes. Their family has been saving people and hunting things for countless years, ever since their mother died after making a deal with a demon to help her future husband stay alive. Because after that, her husband and sons spent their lives hunting vampires, wendigos, demons, werewolves, changelings, you name it, and they've hunted it. But the way they see things, most of the time at least, is that the only way to stop these things is to kill them. And while to us viewers that makes sense, other characters on the show that aren't hunting monsters see them as serial killers who will do what they want and get away with it. Even when they've been arrested or have been impersonated by some form of shapeshifter, Sam and Dean always make it out, even if one or the other ends up dying every season. They make it out of that too, which is weird and screwed up, especially when Dean was being tortured in hell, and then Sam had no soul. What? And at 6, Rorschach. While the character of Rorschach may not be new, and neither are the inkblot tests he's based on, the version of the character that has been tied into the DC universe, Reggie Long, had linked Watchmen to the main DC universe in 2017 with the Doomsday Clock miniseries that ran from November 22nd, 2017 to December 18th, 2019. Watchmen is a group of characters, but many assume or consider Rorschach to be the protagonist, since he really drives the plot forward and serves as the series narrator. As a vigilante, Rorschach believes in moral absolutes, as if there is a clear good and evil and you are either one or the other, no gray areas, no shades of gray, and definitely not 50 of them. The mask he wears consists of a Rorschach inkblot test that is always changing with his breath. This is also how he got his name. But it also helps to convey his sense of morality where everything is black and white, and it's conveyed even better because as the inkblot changes, it doesn't start gray and fade, it is always either black or white.
Number 5. Rorschach. Similar to Judge Dredd, Rorschach's anti-hero nature stems from his absolute sense of good and evil. Rorschach knows exactly what he thinks is acceptable and will do what is correct and good, regardless of the consequences to himself or others. An example of this is his refusal to be quiet about Ozymandias' plan, even though he knew it was for the greater good. While personally I'm generally more attracted to characters who live in shades of grey, there's something so interesting about a guy who's so concerned with morality, who also decapitates dogs and burns people alive. Number 4. The Punisher. Frank Castle actually wanted to be a priest, but his inability to forgive people stopped that in its tracks. So he joined the Marines and went to Vietnam. Soon after his return to the US, his wife and 2 kids are murdered by the mafia. And when the law fails to deal with the killers, Castle decides he needs to take justice into his own hands and becomes the Punisher. I'm a huge Punisher fan because he has such a cool contrast between high moral standards and a very hands-on, almost amoral approach to dealing with the crime. Plus, John Bernthal is the frickin' man. Number 3. Wolverine. This might be a bit controversial because Wolverine's a bit less anti than the other anti-heroes on this list, but I think he totally qualifies. Logan hates working with others, he has a much looser moral code, and has been known to slice people in half. It's harder to see the anti-hero nature in the recent films since he's often stuck taking on a more conservative, heroic persona, but especially in Logan you get to see his disdain for regular heroics. Hopefully the next person to play Wolverine nails this side of the character as well. Number 2. Spawn. When you think anti-hero, a few names probably come to mind. Chances are one of those names is Spawn. He worked for the CIA for much of his life. After dying and being sent to hell due to the acts he committed while in the CIA, Simmons is returned to life in a demonic form. Spawn spends most of his life either stopping bad guys or trying to keep the forces of heaven and hell from destroying the earth. With an ever-changing supersuit and extremely grey morals, Spawn makes for a classic and powerful anti-hero. Number 1. Deadpool. Of course. I don't have to tell you about everyone's favorite mercenary because he's everyone's favorite. But Deadpool is just such an amazing character. Sure, his mutation is cool, he's an amazing fighter, fighter, but the real reason we all love him is his attitude. Kicking bad guy butt is always good, but kicking bad guy butt while soaring through the air, calling him an idiot, and simultaneously mooning another bad guy is even better. I can't freaking wait for the next Deadpool movie. I recently rewatched it and it was even better than I remembered. Now I did mention in another video that Deadpool's on Netflix and everyone got mad, so let me clarify, it's on Canadian Netflix, because Canada's the best, and Deadpool's Canadian. Honestly, I'm wondering if it was done as kind of a joke about Deadpool being Canadian, because it's pretty much the only movie that only we have. Yeah, finally we get to win.